Good evening. Today is September 12th. It's our Sac Metro Fire District regular board meeting. I'd like to ask Director Gould to start this meeting with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Metro Cable announcement. The open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14, replay on Sunday, September 15th at 9 a.m. and Monday, September 16th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. Webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The open session meetings are also available for viewing on the district website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. This is the public's opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within the district's jurisdiction, including items on or not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers?
We do have one speaker this evening, Mr. Roger Mitchell.
Roger, go ahead and take the podium.
Madam Chairperson, Directors, Chief Harms, staff, ladies and gentlemen of Metro Fire. My name is Roger Mitchell, lifetime resident of the Rio Linda, Alberta area. I'm here tonight to advertise our fundraising dinner on the 5th of October for the restoration of Rio Linda's second fire engine and the restoration of your fire station, Old 111. We have a couple of world-class speakers again this year. And I'm proud to say that the chief of Metro Fire has agreed to say a few gracious words for us, as well as Supervisor Sue Frost, and we'll have a couple of other guest speakers that will be there. So at this time, I'd also like to thank Chief Harms. Chief Harms and Deputy Chief Casantini attended a meeting at Old Station 111 approximately 2 weeks ago. It was a wonderful meeting. It was basically talk about how we're going to restore that station completely and where the funding will come from. The chief had some wonderful ideas. Sue Frost, our supervisor, had some wonderful ideas. And after that meeting, at the meeting here 2 weeks ago, I was approached by a director that had talked to Sue Frost. I believe Sue Frost called that director and had a conversation. And he came up to me and he says, listen, you have to do what Sue Frost told you to do. And basically what she had asked me, she says, I'm a great person to raise money. She says, how much is it going to cost to do this station in your vision? And I said, well, I'm not a contractor. 1.5 million? And I honestly forget who in the audience there at that meeting, but they said, well, how about 2.5? I said, yeah, that'll work. But in Supervisor Frost, she says, I can get in the door with people that have money, but without a plan in my hand, I can't get the money. And she said, do you know where the plan's at right now? And I guess I looked at her kind of funny, but no. And she goes like this, she says, Roger, it's in your head. She says, I need it on paper. So I says, well, I'm working on the truck, I'm working on the station, I got a personal life. She said, it doesn't matter. She says, you got to do this. So that director that approached me the next week after that meeting says, look, I don't care if you have to sit up till 4 in the morning for 3 or 4 weeks. You have got to get this done. So publicly, I would like to thank Director Jim Barnes for that conversation because it was a good conversation. And I would tell this board that I always talk to you about redoing the truck. But there's a group of people now put together, informally maybe, but that station's going to be a shining example for this fire district for an old station with old equipment in it. And I feel confident in that. But again, publicly, I would like to thank Director Barnes because he kind of took the pitchfork out and, and I took it to heart. So changing the subject quickly. When we first got the truck, we started tearing it apart, and guess what we found between the water tank and the bulkhead of the hose bed? Those are original 1927 plates that come off of that truck. Don't ask me why they weren't turned into Motor V. I don't know. We could speculate all night. They've been restored. Cost $200 a piece to restore those. We went and registered the truck with motor vehicle. Everything was fine. 6 weeks later, they called back and said, oh, we can't do this. The way the registration works is it's registered under year of manufacture plates. 1927, the truck is a 27, and it's legal to do that. If you have an old car, you can do the same thing. And I know there's a couple of directors on the board. One I forget, but I think Director Gould is one that's very interested in antique cars, so I'm sure he knows about that law. But when they called back and said they couldn't do it, I said, well, can you tell me why? And they said, sure. In the vehicle code, it addresses regular vehicles, commercial vehicles, but when we type the E in the computer won't let us do it. So I said, the only thing holding us up on this is a computer. Yeah. So we've spent 4 years of writing documents, having 4 or 5 meetings with DMV, pictures, and we're lucky that the last person that took this on at Motor Vehicle owns a Model A, so he has some sympathy for us. He called me this morning. He says, bring down the plates that you now have that were given to you 4 years ago, the modern plates. Turn them in. We will give you the new paperwork, and you can use your original plates. So these plates represent 4 years of hard work just to get us to be able to do it. So if you have any questions about the building and or the truck? Thank you very much. And again, Director Barnes, thank you again from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate that talk you and I had.
Thank you, Roger. Moving on to the consent items, are there any questions, comments?
Madam Chair, I'd move the consent.
Second.
Madam Clerk, we have a first and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Director Sailors,
Aye.
Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, moving on to the presentation items, the Transparency Certificate of Excellence, California Special Districts Association. Please welcome Mr. Dane Waddle to the podium.
Well, good evening, board members, staff, and community. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Dane Wadley. I'm the field coordinator for the California Special Districts Association, basically the local liaison for CSDA to special districts here in Sacramento County. And here tonight on behalf of the Special District Leadership Foundation, which is the foundation arm of CSDA, which is dedicated to promoting excellence in special districts through a number of recognition programs. And one of them, of course, being the reason we're here tonight, the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence, which, as you know, your district has earned for the second time, actually. So very, very happy to be here to make that presentation. The certificates, you may recall I was here 2 years ago doing this presentation, and the certificate's good for 2 years. You have to continually, re-up it. So hence I'm back to always a good excuse to come back and recognize transparency in special districts and certainly amongst our members. So I'd like to just go through, again, just a few brief points about what the certificate entails and why it's important for, obviously, the board and the staff is no doubt aware of it as they went through all the checklist items to actually earn it. But the certificate itself was created about 6 years or so ago, and obviously in an effort for districts to showcase their efforts in transparency. And there are three main subject areas for this program. Again, there's basically a big long checklist that the district has to meet all these items to actually earn the certificate. The first subject area is the basic transparency requirements. So, all of you board members having your ethics trainings and all those certificates, the district filing all of its reports with the state controller's office in a timely manner, things of that nature. Then the second subject area is what we call the website requirements, which includes, posting your meeting schedules online, all your audits, your budgets, obviously using that website tool to communicate with the public. And then finally, there is the outreach requirements, as we call them, which includes like having like a regular district newsletter, a community budget hearing, or you can do what's called a community transparency review in lieu of one of those if you want. So all that's to say, long story short, that you guys have met all these obviously, and as you can imagine, I make quite a few of these presentations to various districts, and as I always like to say, it's not just, putting up a website and throwing some information on it and you're good and we give you the certificate. It's much more involved in that, and it's quite an accomplishment. So, obviously, why is transparency important? It allows for accountability, I think is the best way that I always like to put it again during these presentations. And, another note too, as you're aware that, CSDA, in addition to these recognition programs and all of our training events, we're also your advocate downtown, right? And, when we have districts who go through these programs, take the effort to earn these transparency certificates and the other programs that we have, it helps quite a bit actually in our efforts to advocate on your behalf down in the state capitol. So we certainly appreciate it. Again, it makes our lives a little bit easier down there when districts choose to take that step, go through these transparency programs, and obviously earn the certificate. So again, just can't express our appreciation enough for you guys for doing this, and congratulations again. As I mentioned, it's a 2-year program. Each year we're kind of fine-tuning it as we basically go along to add new requirements as the case may be, and make sure it's as rigorous as possible, but also attainable. So unless you have any questions, I have a certificate over here. We'll actually do the formal presentation. Love to get a picture with the board and staff and whoever else would like one. But once again, congratulations to Sacramento Metro Fire for earning the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence. I'm happy to answer any questions.
The only thing I have, thank you for being here again and recognizing the great work of the high-powered people here. It's nice to hear, but let me ask you this. You said you make presentations. Not every district is able to fulfill this award or this presentation that you're about to do, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to make sure. I know it says excellence, it says transparency. You're here again for 2 times a 2-year cycle, but we know not every district is receiving this award as well.
Absolutely, yes, and it's definitely it's a kind of a voluntary action, right? You guys as a board have made this a priority, and of course the staff has executed it, and obviously we're trying to get more of our districts to do it, but at this point not everybody has. So absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Questions, comments? No?
Very good.
All right.
Yeah, that's right.
Picture time.
I think the acting president's fine. The acting president, she's dressed up, she can go.
Come on.
Go.
Vice President, I'm asking you.
You put it that way. Try to get above the rib cage. Come on, above the rib cage. Shoulders. Okay, perfect. Get in there. Oh, geez. Can you get us all in? No, seriously, please don't. I got good. Might need us a rose. Come on, tighten it up over there, guys. All right, here we go. 1, 2, and 3. Do a portrait move tutorial later after the meeting.
I was wondering, did you get all this on video and how long it took us?
Yeah.
Actually, right now. The communities feel very confident.
Notice that you can't see through the transparency and everything.
Oh, it's opaque?
Yeah, I think it'll be on glass.
That's odd.
I thought
All
so.
right, everybody ready? Okay, so we're moving on to the action item. First action item is fiscal year 2019-20 final budget. CFO Thomas. Welcome.
Good evening, directors. I believe that Chief Harms would like to say a few words before I get started on this presentation of the 1920 final budget.
Yeah, just real quick, it's one of those things that we've either brought preliminary budget or we've brought it to the finance committee. First off, just the thank to Amanda and her staff and really everybody that manages budgets within the district. And I really feel that the first year of being here was kind of learning it, but now with all of us in a position, it has become kind of an expectation of what is expected, the expenses. A large portion of it is grown in here that manages the people side of it, and a part of it is managing the district portions of it. I do believe that we're at a point where we have a nice balance of being able to look at what are our needs today, what are some of the needs for tomorrow. An example of that would be apparatus and having a plan in place and being able to fund those things and be able to move forward. So at the end of this, just I think that the budget we bring to you today is a balance between labor and the expenses to run the district. There's some one-time expenses that are in here, but it really is with the opportunity with some grants for us, the ability to move forward.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'll jump into the presentation. Before I do, I did want to acknowledge that the final budget was presented to the Finance and Audit Committee at the meeting on August 22nd. There were some changes that were made since then, primarily to reflect the final terms in the MOUs that the board adopted this evening. So that accounts for the difference between the presentation to the Finance and Audit Committee and what you will see this evening on the final budget. So as Chief Harms said, really we started off the budget process for fiscal year 1920 with the preliminary budget that the board adopted on June 13th of this year. And that budget had a deficit in the general fund of about $400,000, again, primarily attributable to one-time costs that we expect to incur in 1920. The changes in the final budget compared to the preliminary budget are an increase in general fund revenues of about $900,000 and an increase in general fund expenditures and transfers out of about $1.5 million. The increase in expenses offsetting the increase in revenues for a bit larger of a deficit and resulting in a projected general fund reserve of 11.5%. That would be as of June 30th, 2020. So looking at the recommended final budget for all of the district's funds here on this table, I'm going to focus on the first column, which is the general fund. So we're looking at projected revenues for the fiscal year of about $218 million. Projected expenditures or recommended expenditures of about $221 million. And then we have transfers that are going out of and coming into the general fund from the other funds. So looking at those, the largest transfer going out is to the Capital Facilities Fund. That's about $6.8 million, and that's primarily to fund debt service on capital leases that are paid out of the Capital Facilities Fund. And then we also have just under $90,000 that's going to the Grants Fund, which is a remaining match on a grant in that fund. And then offsetting, or more than offsetting those transfers out, we have a transfer that's coming in from the IGT fund. So we have about $9.2 million in funding coming in from the IGT fund. And we talked about this at preliminary budget. We are seeing a significant increase in that funding source this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year as a result of some changes in the federal match percentages that we're getting associated with those Medi-Cal transports. So overall, when you look at the revenues, the expenses, and the transfer activity, we have a net change in fund balance of negative $1 million, which can be attributed to one-time costs that we're experiencing in 1920 related to the replacement of SCBAs. So we're really looking at that one-time use of reserves as going towards those costs that are occurring in 1920. So looking at some of the year-to-year change in activity in the general fund. So when I started this presentation, I talked about the change from preliminary to final budget. Throughout the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk about the change from fiscal year 18-19, our preliminary unaudited actual results, compared to the budget for 19-20. So looking at revenues, as I mentioned, revenue budget of $218 million, which is about a $11.6 million increase compared to last year. Labor expense budget of $187 million, which is about a $10 million increase compared to last year. And then total expenses, $221 million, about a $15 million increase compared to last year. And then if you look down at the transfer activity, the first of those two lines in the box there, so our IGT transfer in, $9.2 million, you can see that's about almost a $2.5 million increase compared to the 18-19 funding from that source. And then we have about a $1.5 million increase in the transfer that's going out to the Capital Facilities Fund. So again, resulting in that approximate $1 million deficit in the general fund for 19-20. Looking at revenues in the general fund, I know this is a chart you're all familiar with, but it kind of gives us some historical context. And you can see, the trend going back to 2008-9, obviously revenues dipping down during the recession and then recovery since then. So we are projecting a seventh straight year of increase in property tax revenues and a ninth straight year of increase in total revenues for 19-20. If you look at the dark blue and sort of the proportion of total revenues that it represents, back in 2008-9, property taxes were 80% of revenues. For 19-20, they're about 70% of revenues. So you can see that we're less reliant on property tax revenues than we were at the beginning of this period, and that's really because of the increased revenues that we've seen from our medic cost recovery. So this pie chart shows just that, about 70% of the 19-20 revenues coming from property taxes. So that's that big blue part of the pie there. The next largest slice of the pie is kind of the orangish peach color towards the bottom. Charges for services, almost a quarter of revenues, and that is primarily from our medic cost recovery. And then we have the yellow slice, that operating transfer in, that's the IGT funding, accounting for about 4% of total funding in the general fund. So as I said, general fund revenues of $218 million. Overall, that's a $12 million increase compared to last year. Property taxes and intergovernmental revenues, which are property tax related, are accounting for $8 million of that increase. That's about a 5% increase in property tax revenues and intergovernmental revenues. Medic cost recovery is $2 million of that increase, and that's primarily related to the GEMT quality assurance fee, which is a relatively new program, and has sort of phased in towards the end of 18-19, so we're seeing some of those revenues accumulate in 19-20. And then finally, we have $1 million budgeted for mobile integrated health, which is a pilot program that I know the board is going to be getting a presentation on shortly, but this is funding that's coming from the hospitals in the area. And then added to that $218 million of revenues, we have that $9 million coming in from IGT, so total revenues and financing sources of $227 million. Looking at expenditures, in the general fund, you can see that labor costs are accounting for about 82% of budgeted expenditures, services and supplies about 13%. We have taxes, licenses, and assessments of 2%. And then that operating transfers out of 3% is mainly the money that is going to the Capital Facilities Fund to pay for debt service on our capital leases. Looking at that 82% part of the pie, this is kind of how that breaks out into wages and benefits. So if you were to just take that 82% slice and look at what that's made up of, you can see that 56% of that is wages and 44% is benefits. And that 44% slice, we have pension-related costs, so our CalPERS, pension bonds, and SCRs, accounting for about 25% of this overall pie that you're seeing here on this page, and medical for active and retirees for about another 15%. So you can see that our benefits costs are sort of creeping up to be almost as much as our wages in terms of how the budget for labor expenses breaks out. So looking at those general fund labor costs, as I mentioned, $187 million budgeted in fiscal year 1920, which is a $10 million increase compared to 1819. So some of the changes from 1819 to 1920 is there's a 4.3% wage increase effective September 1st of this year. So that's accounting for about $4 million of the increase. We have increases in pension and OPEB costs, primarily related to payments on unfunded liabilities. That's about $5 million of the increase, and then medical premium increases. So effective January 1st, there are new medical premiums that will go into effect under our CalPERS medical plans. Some of them are very significant increases, primarily resulting from the fact that CalPERS has changed their health regions, and so we're now in a consolidated region with all of Northern California as opposed to Sacramento being separated out. Overall, we're looking at about $1 million increase in costs if everybody were to stay in the plan that they are in today. Employees obviously have an option to make a different choice, so that would have an impact on what the actual cost ends up being, but based on current plan choices, this is about $1 million impact to the budget. The other change that we have with a budget compared to an actual year is that in our budget, we're assuming that all of our positions will be filled, so we're budgeting for the salaries and benefits costs of those positions, which results in a lower overtime number being budgeted compared to actual. To the extent that positions aren't filled and overtime is incurred, we would expect those savings and costs to balance each other out. So some of the other expenditure categories in the general fund, we have a services and supplies budget totaling $30 million, which is a $5 million increase compared to 1819. A large component of that is the $900,000 in additional services and supplies costs for the SCBA purchase. And we also have an increase of about $600,000 for liability and property insurance, both of which we talked about when we were going over the preliminary budget, so those have not changed. We have an assessments, debt service, and contribution category. That budget totals $4.6 million. That is primarily for assessments that are paid to the county and to the state. And then finally, we have those transfers out that I have already mentioned. So looking at some of the other funds, so moving on from the general fund to focus on the significant items that are budgeted in other funds. In the capital facilities fund, we have budgeted capital outlay of $7 million. So that includes $2.1 million for 3 Type 1 engines, about $900,000 for 2 water tenders, $800,000 for SCBA packs. So these are the capital items associated with the SCBA purchase, which are in addition to the services and supplies that I mentioned, and about $600,000 for 3 ambulances. In the grants fund, we have $4.5 million that's budgeted for the purchase of regional SCBAs, so that's our agency and other regional agencies. $2.2 million of that is for Metro Fire. So that's that AFG grant combined with what's budgeted in the capital facilities fund and what's budgeted in the general fund and services and supplies represents all of the SCBA purchase activity that's occurring in this budget. And then we have a shush gap grant of $150,000 in the grant fund. And the lease properties fund, we have $1.1 million of lease revenue and about $700,000 of expenditures associated with our leased properties. And then finally, in the development impact fees fund, there's $3.8 million budgeted to begin the design and construction of Station 68. So with the recommended final budget, our projected reserves as of the end of the fiscal year are 25 million, which, as I mentioned earlier, is about 11.5% of net budgeted expenditures. And as we look beyond fiscal year 1920, really continue to focus on the challenges that we have already identified, as we talked about previous budgets and our 5-year forecast in the past. So those being pension and medical cost increases, particularly related to the unfunded liabilities associated with the pension and retiree medical benefit, our capital replacement and maintenance needs, and our reliance on intergovernmental transfer funding. So as I mentioned, a preliminary budget, having an additional $2.5 million from this funding source is certainly a good thing, but it also makes us much more reliant on that funding, which is susceptible to change in the future. So that's something that we need to continue to be aware of. What this looks like sort of in terms of the numbers, this chart is showing revenues and transfers in green and expenses and transfers out in red. And you can see the 1920 budget year there just to the right of the center of the page. And so all the years beyond that are really a forecast based on the information that we have about what we expect to happen with property tax revenues and what we expect to happen with our other revenues and expenditures. And you can see that, looking out over the next couple of years, we do expect to be challenged with, expenditures increasing at a faster pace than revenues, really driven by those increases in pension and medical costs. So that's going to continue to put pressure on our budgets over the next couple of years, and obviously something that, we will continue to focus on as we move through this year and into future budget years. That concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I will just, for the record, read that our recommendation is adoption of the final budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No questions.
And as chair of the Finance Committee, we concur with her with our CFO's recommendation.
Outstanding.
Thank you very much for the
information.
report.
Thank you.
and presentation.
We have to individually go through these. I'd entertain a
I
motion.
make the motion that we approve or adopt the final budget for fiscal year 2019-2020.
We do need to do each one.
Madam Chair, I'll move the 2019-20 final budget for General Operating Fund 212A.
Perfect. We have a first and a second. Please call the roll.
Dr. Sailors.
Aye.
Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Barnes. And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I'll make a motion for Resolution 2019 Final Budget for the Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Could you please call roll?
Dr. Sailors.
Aye.
Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move 2019-20 final budget for the Grants Fund 212G.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dr. Sailors.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Did I call you twice? I skipped Gould.
You skipped Gold.
Dr. Gould. Dr. Gould.
I still lie.
Clark.
Clark.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move Resolution D, the 2019-2020 final budget for the Development Impact Fees Fund 212 2I.
Second.
Perfect. Can you please call roll?
Dr. Sailors.
Aye.
Director Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move Resolution 2019-20 final budget for the Lease Properties Fund of 212L.
I second.
Perfect. Please call the roll.
Dr. Sailors,
Aye.
Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move Resolution F 2019-20 final budget for the IGT Fund 212M.
Second.
Perfect. And please call the roll.
Dr. Sailors,
Aye.
Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Perfect. All right, moving on to reports. President's report, there is nothing to report. Moving on to the fire chief's report. Chief Harms.
Good evening, directors. Quite a few things on my report tonight. The first thing is 2 retirements. On September 2nd, Battalion Chief Rick Griggs retired. Rick has had 32 years of service and was the battalion chief in EMS. And then the next day, on September 3rd, Assistant Chief Randy Hine retired with 25 years of service. Randy was the A shift shift commander. So congratulations to both of them. We wish them well in their retirement as they move forward. Effective Monday on the 9th, we have Battalion Chief Mike Lozano. And Mike is moving up of an out-of-class assignment for that A shift commander's position. We'll put him in there. The shift commanders give us that on-duty presence. They're the highest command officer that is in place, and each of them manage a shift 24/7. Mike had a very interesting first day. It was one of the pictures that I sent you of the large scrap fire going, and a very busy 48 hours. But Mike will be in that position acting until we fill that assistant chief's position. We hired a new fire investigator on the 9th. His name is Paul Tuwala. He has some past experience as a arson and past experience as a deputy, and I believe that he did start on the 9th. Yes, he started on the 9th then. Career opportunity.
Chief, he doesn't have experience as an arson, does he? 'Cause I
Arson
would think our
in
background check would pick
In
that
arson.
out.
No, we want that. That's the best
Oh.
people to hire. Takes one to catch one. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you from the sheriff's office.
Yeah, Barnes, get over there and shape this guy up.
Chief Wagaman hired him. We do have a recruitment opportunity now for the EMS Battalion Chief Day assignment that is opened. Some of the meetings that I attended was the Citrus Heights elected official reception. Myself and Chief Shannon attended the Public Safety Appreciation Night at Sac State, and we were able to see a great football game over there of Sac State winning. On the 5th, we had a station dedication at Station 51 for Captain Mike George. It was very well attended, and a number of folks from the directors that was there, a number of folks from on duty, and a number of retirees that had spent their career with Captain George was there. If you remember, probably about 8-9 months ago, we started the program. This is the second one, and just a great job of everybody pulling it together and working together for the station dedications. Also on the 5th, the California Professional Firefighters, President Rice, invited all the local fire chiefs, and we had a luncheon together and talked about some of the legislative issues. And a lot of it was President Rice thanking really the local departments and the support that we give them as far as apparatus or working together. And as he said, you all are in our backyard, and it's very easy for us to call upon you to help us, or when things are needed at the Capitol. So it was a very good interaction with everybody. On the 10th, Fire Marshal Barsdale went over and represented me also at the Citrus Heights Chamber luncheon. Yesterday on 9/11, we had just a number of companies along with a number of off-duty folks that went downtown and did the stair climb. They have 343 people climb 110 stories. Across the whole area beforehand, there was just a really good showing of Metro members that were there and willing to do the climb, which is very, very challenging to be able to do it. And the neat thing also is that the academy class was there. and assisted with checking in, and then they stood by. If somebody couldn't complete the climb, then they stepped in and did the climb for them then. We gave the engineers exam just the beginning of this week. We had 38 candidates took the written exam. We had 36 members that passed. This week they're going through a kind of an academy, and then they'll take the second half, which is the hands-on portion of it. I believe next week they'll do the 30th of the month. They'll do the hands-on portion of it moving forward then with that. One of the handouts that you guys had is the driver safety and awareness. We came to you probably a few months ago, and one of the things that we talked about was the increased cost of insurance, some of the accidents, and what are some of the things that we are going to do, or what are some of the things that we're trying to do to reduce that visibility that we have out there, or that liability that we have out there on the road. We have seen it with like our other insurances of it going up, but the training division along with operations and really the fleet and with HR, everybody has pulled together to say we need to reduce accidents and we need to improve our awareness. So you'll see there what we've done is a program every month. It comes out and it will identify the accidents that have happened, what are the causes of those, what are some things that are prevention mechanisms that can be put into it. We wanted it to be consistent, so we take in there and really the training division went through each one of those, and you can see in there and did those. And then the extra pages behind there is the strategy of how do we prevent these, or if there's something else that has happened kind of across the United States that we could have a potential. Let's put those in there and see what we can do as far as reducing the amount of accidents and reducing the severity of accidents that we have. So we've all committed that for this next year, we will have each month a program that will come out and identify what we did well, and maybe what we need to improve on. The last thing that I want to talk about, and some of you as directors were here back in the day, but across the hall we had the CES, and that was the California Exercise Simulation Center. And in 2011, the board had a resolution that was passed to accept SHISHCAP grant funding, and basically with Cal OES allocated about $4 million to build out the other side of the training rooms over there. The initial thing was to provide major disaster management, be able to work with the federal government, provide training here with training offsite, have rooms that were breakout rooms, and through really the technology of it, you'd be able to communicate and have really a high-level simulation that would be functioning over there. Over the years, there really was only one successful simulation that was ever done over there. The technology portions of it, the actual systems that were in place over there, the hardware that was into the walls over there, as much as people worked on both sides of Cal OES, our own folks here and with the folks there in the CES, it has never really come to a position that we've been able to do training over there of what it was originally intended to do. Right after my arrival in 16, in the start of 17, they went back to Roblin, who is the company. They hired some annuitants to come in on a hard push to get it to work. Cal OES really had no additional funding to put towards it. The technology really didn't work. We went through the process. I had a notification of the grant award closeout. Met with Cal OES, went through it with the director and his staff over there. In May, we received authorization for the disposition of the assets. As they understood too, it's not going to work moving forward. We had some back and forth on some basic hardware in which they said, okay, we're done with it. And on the August 29th, we completed the grant, and there's no obligation to FEMA or Cal OES moving forward. Our plan now is to look at the place as far as the technology that's over there. All of those assets are our assets now, and being able to look at and say, what can we do to really get back to the basics of how do we use the room for really either meetings or teaching or for simulations of a very basic level over there moving forward. That ends my report unless you have any questions about any of those items.
questions? No. No questions. All right, moving on to firefighters, Local 522. Trevor Jameson, you want to join us?
Good evening, directors, Chief Harms, staff. I think it's important too to remember that yesterday was September 11th, and that we don't forget that day. We have a pretty special event that happens on September 11th every year at that stair climb, and our members are instrumental in doing that. And throughout the years, it's been nice to see different members step up and take over that role. And I think it's one of those really it's a special piece for Sacramento. Some places do it on different days, but we've been able to maintain it on September 11th, and I'm very proud that our members are part of that, and the region comes out for that. I'm also wanted to just bring somebody. I just got back from a conference for the Deferred Compensation Committee. It's an annual conference, and I'm very proud to be part of that committee. I've been part of it since 2012. And one of the great things, I think a lot of great things about the membership out there, but when I get to travel around and meet other people, Metro Fire has a wonderful reputation, both operationally and administratively. But we're also very highly respected as a Deferred Compensation Committee. We have people that go back to the beginning of it, and we just added the newest member as a 3-year employee here. The interest from the membership was, on the last one, I think you heard, was 11 people. When we travel there, we show up and we go into the meetings, and we all wear the same color shirt every day. Everyone knows us. We're known to be well-educated. Many people in those at that event that's around the country seek us out and to hear what we do and how our committee functions. And I think it's just a great representation. And at this point, I think we're up to about 117 million under management for deferred comp. There's over 500 people actively deferring, and there's still 900 people involved in the plan. It's a very highly respected plan in the way it's managed through our. We have a consultant in our providers nationwide right now. And then I just wanted to cover it's good to have the contract done. It's a journey. It's ups and downs. It's emotional. The membership has needs, and there'll always be things that we don't agree on, and we'll always continue to strive to do the best for our members. I do want to say that the process was professional, wasn't personal. I think everyone maintained that throughout, and it's something I think we can all be proud of and use to move forward, and even in all relationships ongoing. So it's good to be done, and I appreciate the dialogue that was between the board, the chief, and the team of 522. And finally, I just wanted to say good luck on your evaluation tonight, Chief Harms.
Wow, it's begun. Nice.
All right. All right, moving on to committee and delegate reports. The executive committee, we do not have a meeting scheduled. Moving on to communications, Communication Center, JPA, AC Wagaman.
Good evening, directors and Chief Harms. Tyler Wagaman, Assistant Chief Operations, speaking on behalf of the JPA Communications Board. The board last met here at the Metro Fire Board Chambers on September 10th, last Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning. I have no items to report out on. It was a relatively small agenda. The board is going to meet again on September 24th, 2019 at 3121 Gold Canal Drive at 9 a.m. Unless you have any questions for me, that concludes that report.
Any questions? No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, did I miss something? Oh, stay for the ops, he says.
No report. I'm staying for the ops report.
I apologize.
That's quite okay. I will reintroduce myself for the record. Tyler Wagaman, Assistant Chief Operations. I'm filling in for Deputy Chief Bridge tonight for your operations report. I'm going to start off by covering our EMS incidents. Over the last 2 weeks, Metro Fire has run 4,173 medical incidents at a transport rate of 73.5%. Now, when we couple the EMS calls with all the other calls that Metro Fire runs, we ran a total of 5,545 calls. Of those, we ran 14 building fires. When we look at our busiest medic company, then our busiest engine company, coming in first place is going to be Medic 53 at 284 calls, and Engine 53 at 266 calls. Again, this is a 2-week time frame. Also, we had a USAR deployment, which does not occur very often, but our members are certainly ready when the call comes in. On September 3rd, our California Urban Search and Rescue Task Force 7 deployed with 9 Metro Fire members to Charlotte, North Carolina to assist in the rescue efforts and recovery following the aftermath of Hurricane Doreen. The team staged in Charlotte for potential impacts of the storm. They had no field operations that they performed, but they were certainly ready if they were called upon. To date, all of our members have returned, with the exception of one who's assisting with the logistics and transporting the equipment cache back to Sacramento, so I'm sure he's on the road at this point. Also, within this 2-week period, we did deploy an OES Type 3 strike team. 4 of our members were dispatched as a part of a regional OES strike team to the Red Bank Fire near Red Bluff on Thursday, September 5th. After 3 days of work, they went through an emergency demobilization process and were redirected to the Lime incident on Sunday, September 8th. The Lime incident was started by a lightning strike on September 5th and was located in the Klamath National Forest, west of I-5 and east of the Klamath River. As of this morning, the fire was 25% contained and scorched about 2,000 acres. Our Metro Fire crews associated with that company were demobilized this morning and did arrive back here in Sacramento just a few hours ago. A couple incidents that I would like to highlight. When we look at our structure fires, I made reference that we had 14 structure fires within the 2-week period. The first structure fire that we had in our own backyard occurred in the Florin area. I'm going to go ahead and put a photograph up as well so you can take a look at what I'm talking about. There we go. Sorry if you can't see that, it's a little washed out. The first was a residential house fire in the Florin area. The first 2 engine company arrived to a fire working on the Bravo side, or what we call the left side of the house as we're looking at the house from the street, and confirmed pretty quickly that the fire had extended up the exterior to the eave and into the attic space. And there was no fire involvement in the interior living space. The crews pulled a line and extinguished the exterior fire, as well as took a line to the interior. Folks from our first 2 truck companies split their crews to went up on the roof to perform what we call vertical ventilation. And that's to cut a hole if necessary into the attic space and allow the products of combustion to come out of the attic, as well as get on the interior and start salvage operations. Where this fire looks relatively simple, these can be complicated when we don't have a fire in the living space, because the last thing that we want to do is add more damage to a house that's already been damaged on the exterior. So crews did a great job at moving personal content and things that can't be replaced out of the way before they went up in the attic space to extinguish the fire. The next incident was a commercial structure fire. This occurred in the Arden area apartment complex. Crews were dispatched for reported smoke and fire from the windows of an apartment. And they were quickly updated that folks were still trying to get family members out as the fire was spreading to the 2nd floor. Units arrived to a 2-story apartment complex with heavy fire from the 1st floor lapping into the 2nd floor. The fire building was located at the far back of this complex, which made establishing a water supply a little bit challenging. That's the hose line that goes from the first 2 pumper to the closest fire hydrant. Crews initiated what we call a transitional fire attack. And this is an exterior hose line that they use to stop that fire progression from the 1st floor and getting up into the 2nd floor to buy them some time to get their self-contained breathing apparatus on, get a secondary hose line onto the interior, which they did rather quickly, and extinguish the fire. When they got inside, they also quickly completed another search just to confirm that all the occupants did in fact get out, which they did, which is good news. So more great work for the men and women of Metro Fire. Again, just snapshotting 2 incidents of the many that occurred over the last 2 weeks.
Which unit did that fire start in?
The downstairs unit? Yeah, it is both the same. The majority of heat was coming out of that far right window, bottom floor. Yep. So with that concludes the operations report, unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions? No? Okay. Moving on to California Fire Rescue Training, JPA, there is nothing to report, and the next meeting is September 19th in the CESC. Moving on to the Finance and Audit Committee, Director Kelly.
The Finance and Audit Committee will meet again on September 26th at 5:30, and we all know what we did.
All right. Policy Committee, Director Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Policy Committee met this evening and reviewed an updated nepotism policy, and we now have, as a matter of policy, a definition on romance. That concludes my report.
Right. All right, moving on to board member questions and comments. We will start with Director Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to say a couple of thank yous. To be able to be part of Station 51 and Captain Michael George's dedication was special. I'll tell you, I think what was even more special is watching all the retirees show up and learning that everybody shows up and shows that support. It helps the family along, but it also, I think, has the newer employees that realizes that when we say we never forget, that's what it truly means. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of that. It was a great presentation. Captain Vessel, Public Safety Appreciation Night, thank you very much, Chief Harms, for that support. President Nelson, Sac State was absolutely blown away for what you were able to provide that day. I always say it's a great opportunity to recruit as well when you have all the students in the stadium and talk about all the great things that we do. So thank you for setting that up. Thank you to Fire Marshal Barsdale. Out in my area, we had a summer fest. It's a big event, and it seems like the last minute I always get that scramble phone call that something's wrong in the inspection. Can you do something? And the best part is I called Lisa, and everything, she was calm, and everything had already been taken care of. I think it was just a last minute panic on our side. But again, thank you to everybody that participated in that. And just to go to the operations report, we always talk about numbers. It sounds like high numbers, but my math, I think, is correct. Ms. Thomas, is 253 calls at a 14-day cycle is roughly 18 calls per day. And when you think about that, that's not just a call, it's drive time, it's handling the call, transporting and coming back, taking a breath, sometimes not able to do that, but have to go back out. So again, thank you to the membership that provide the great service every day. Trevor, thank you for what you did with the contract and balancing that. I can only imagine your phone bill of how many phone calls you received. I know you received several from me, and I just appreciate it tonight. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Clark.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank CFO Amanda Thomas for a great presentation on the budget. I'd like to thank Local 522 for the work, and the cooperation in getting this contract ratified. And finally, I just want to thank the men and women of Metro Fire for the job that they do day in and day out for our jurisdiction and the people in our district. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Director Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the first things I got to see when I started back in 2013 on the board was the pinning of the battalion chief pin on Chief Lozano. So it's absolutely incredible to hear him moving up and see him moving up. And so I wish him all the best in his new role. Amanda, thank you for all the work you and your staff do. And lastly, Trevor, appreciate the professionalism throughout this process. You do your members a very good service, and they should be very proud to have you representing them. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Sailors.
I'd just like to, there, can you hear me now? I'd just like to thank everyone for their great presentations tonight, and Trevor for your great work on the contract, and a shout out to Truck 26. Last Thursday, I went to the reserves in Alberta, their training night, and I learned how to reprogram CAL FIRE's radios. Great training. Thank you for everyone. And to everyone out in the stations, thank you for continuing to do the professional jobs that you do no matter what. Thank you very much.
Director Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dittos to everything that's been said by my colleagues, and I just want to pat everybody in the room on the back. You know, we had a presentation this evening that I think is incredible for a special district like ours, for all of the negativism that revolves around special districts in California. It's a really proud moment, I think, for all of us that we have this ongoing transparency certificate. I know there's a lot of people that participate, but if the public really understood what that means is that we're not hiding anything. This is a government body that they can be proud of and that they know is managing their funds appropriately. And so I just want to give a shout out to everybody in this organization that has anything to do with that for the second time in a row, he wouldn't admit what the percentage of special districts are. He probably isn't willing to say that. But I think it's a really wonderful thing that we continue to maintain that high level of transparency. And as my colleague said, it's ironic that the award they give you is not transparent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Orzali.
That's an excellent point. It should be glass or something you could see through. But anyway, one more point about the transparency recognition. It also plays a role when the district is involved in applying for grants and funding. Part of the analysis is the credibility of the organization. And these recognitions go a long way towards supporting our grants initiative. And it is hard work, and I greatly appreciate everybody's efforts in doing this. The same extends to Amanda and her team for the work on this budget. It is a difficult, arduous task, and something that we all need to be grateful to her and her team for putting together. So with that, thank you very much.
And Director Kelly.
I wanted to thank Amanda Thomas and her team for the heavy lift that they do on the budget. I know it's not easy, and I think everybody knows that the labor agreements would never get signed if you couldn't figure out a way to make it all work. So thank you again.
I'd like to echo the same sentiments of the board regarding the presentation items. I also wanted to congratulate the retirees and wish them a long and healthy retirement to Chief Griggs and Chief Hine. And we will be moving into closed session.